Hello everyone, no one of consequence here, back again with a new video. This is episode 66 in the series, which recounts my ongoing Dungeons & Dragons campaign, which is now in its 10th year. So as always, spoiler alert, in this video I will be revealing details found in this adventure module. And here's the current makeup of the adventuring party for the Descent into the Depths campaign. There are 8 characters being controlled by 5 different players. And once again, here are the various NPCs that are accompanying the party. Where we left off last time, the characters had just gotten their convoy reorganized after their rush through the Great Cavern. And once they did get everything reorganized, they quickly pressed on. They wanted to put some distance between themselves and the monsters they had just escaped from. Once they felt they were a safe distance away, the party stopped for the night to rest up and heal everyone. Now, there was some scoffing from certain players at the end of that last game session, with a couple of them boasting that they could have handled the monsters and did not need that drone noble's intervention. So in response, I took a series of screenshots showing all the off-screen follow-on monsters that were moving in to attack the characters just before the drone noble arrived. Now, just as a reminder from last time, the characters had just dumped some oil to set on fire and temporarily prevent the horde of trolls from chasing them. Additionally, there was an unknown number of gargoyles and bugbears who were intent on looting the caravan and taking the animals to feast upon. And don't forget the charging group of troglodytes which Varys had spotted not too far away from the convoy. But in addition to everything that you saw in the last video, there was also these. There were many more troglodyte soldiers on the way, along with their wyvern-riding king and his personal bodyguard, all of which you can see pointed out here. Nearby, a crowd of ghouls was forming up, waiting for their barrow-white overlords to arrive and lead them into battle. These troglodytes, ghouls, and barrow-whites would have arrived within about 3 combat rounds, had the characters not departed the map when they did. This screenshot shows the barrow-whites themselves, who would have led the ghoul army against the characters. And here's another company of bugbear soldiers, which was on the way to attack. And still yet more groups of bugbears doing the same thing. The bugbear chieftain and his sub-chief had just been informed of the character's presence and were gearing up to lead their troops into battle and claim their share of the reward. And here is a large formation of young bachelor troglodytes eager to prove themselves in battle. Their more experienced leaders had just formed up their ranks, and they were about to move out when the characters left the area. And last, but certainly not least, this is the full extent of the remaining trolls, along with their king, who had all just been stopped by the character's fire barrier. However, they were about to take an alternate route to get to the characters and their wagon train when everything ended. So I told the boastful players that if they really wanted to, they were welcome to turn around and return to the Great Cavern and try to clear everything out. But I didn't really recommend that they attempt it, as Gygax wrote in the preface to that module. There is plenty of danger, though, and any party bent on self-destruction can accomplish the task with relative ease. So with that, the players decided to move on to the next phase of the campaign instead. So the next morning, after they rested, after a few miles of travel, Obrak's dwarven underground senses indicated that the party was nearing the next point marked on the map, which appeared to be an underground river crossing. Rabnuno, the drow merchant, confirmed that an underground river flows through this region, but they had never crossed it at this particular point. So, the party decided to stop the wagon train about a quarter mile short. Then Gorbadoc and Garrett would use their invisibility rings to scout ahead. Garrett had a little trouble finding his way in the near total darkness, but Gorb helped him along, sort of. Along the way, Gorb discovered a small side tunnel branching off from the main tunnel. He explored it for a brief distance, but it appeared to stretch ever deeper into the darkness. Finding nothing that was either threatening or interesting, he soon turned around and rejoined Garrett in the main cavern. A little further along, they soon found another side tunnel branching off from the main cavern in the opposite direction from the first. Again, Gorb did not find anything threatening or interesting, so he returned back to the main tunnel. Gorbadoc and Garrett continued along the main tunnel and soon arrived at a cavern that, judging from the sounds, contained the river crossing. This was because the noise of rushing water grew louder as they approached. There was also what appeared to be an abandoned campsite located next to the river. At the edge of the underground river was a lamppost of sorts containing an entrapped fire beetle in a cage suspended off the ground, which provided light. A similar light post was located on the opposite river bank, illuminating a large flat-bottomed raft with an oar. However, there appeared to be no one present on either side of the river. Garrett went back to bring up the other characters on the wagon train. Meanwhile, Gorbadoc explored further along the shoreline off to the west, but he did not find anything of interest. Aramis arrived first and was standing by the river when a huge fish man of some kind appeared at the raft on the far shore. Keep in mind, Aramis was the first character to arrive, who was not actually invisible and trying to move silently. As other characters began arriving, the Kuo-Toan paddled the raft to the near shore. He disembarked and said something to Aramis while holding out his hand. Of course, Aramis could not understand the language, but he offered the Kuo-Toan 10 platinum coins. The creature accepted them and then pointed at Aramis and the other nearby characters and mules and gestured towards his raft. Once the raft was fully loaded, the Kuo-Toan began rowing it to the far side of the river. The Kuo-Toan then ferried a second load across the underground river after being given another 10 platinum coins. Interestingly, even though Gorbadoc was still using his invisibility ring, the Kuo-Toan had looked directly at him and motioned for him to get on board the raft. In this screenshot, the rest of the party is waiting to be shuttled across the river. Little by little, the characters and their carts were ferried across the river. As long as he was paid for each trip, the Kuo-Toan did not seem to care who or what was loaded onto his raft. In this screenshot, more of the wagon train is about to be transported across the river. And finally, Niobe herded the last few remaining animals onto the raft and then went aboard herself. Once everyone was on the far shore, the caravan reformed and prepared to move out. As the Kuo-Toan boatman returned to his lair, Aramis briefly considered going back and stealing the raft's ore, but he ultimately decided against it. It was only about 3 miles of travel before the next marked area on the map drew near. Unlike other locations, there was nothing to indicate what this place might be other than an intersection. Not knowing what to expect, it was decided that Obrak and Gorbadoc would ride ahead on their goats and scout the area. Additionally, Niobe cast a silence spell on a rock for them to carry along to help conceal their approach. Obrak and Gorbadoc used their infravision and the silence stone to stealthily approach the intersection marked on the map. They soon discovered and explored a series of small side caverns located just off the intersection. Obrak could see from the stonework that mining activity had occurred here very, very recently. He told Gorbadoc that it had been done by skilled miners and not anything like goblins or orcs, but he could discern nothing else about it. Suddenly, Obrak was greeted by a small band of deep gnomes who appeared out of the darkness. Obrak speaks the gnomish language, and Deep Gnome is similar enough that he could understand what they were saying. The group's leader said his name was Trossley, and they decided to approach the characters when they recognized the ring of gnome friendship that Obrak was wearing. Now, to understand how Obrak came in possession of the ring, we have to go all the way back to when the characters were exploring Module T1, the village of Hamlet, and specifically the dungeon level beneath the ruined moat house. During that adventure, Obrak rescued a gnome being held captive by an ogre who was saving the gnome for the cooking pot. In his gratitude, the gnome gave Obrak an iron ring, which he claimed would mark Obrak as a friend of the gnomish people. He said the ring would guarantee that any gnome Obrak encountered would help him if it was within his power to do so. Obrak had been wearing the ring ever since that day, although it had not been of any use to him until now. The Deep Gnome leader explained that they had been mining for gems in this area, but had hidden themselves when they detected Obrak and Gorbadoc approaching. Gorbadoc rode back to bring up the rest of the caravan, while Obrak stayed to speak more with the Deep Gnomes. The rest of the caravan soon arrived at the intersection, and the characters all went in to meet with the Deep Gnomes. Rab Nuno was told to wait outside with Quan and keep watch over the mules. The characters were uncertain how welcome the drow merchant might be among the gnomes. Thorol brought in some elf fruit and pipes from the characters' trade goods to distribute among the Deep Gnomes as gifts. Obrak explained, vaguely, that they were on the way to trade with the drow elves, but that was just a cover story for a more important mission, which would ultimately prove detrimental to the Dark Elves. Satisfied with this explanation from Obrak, who is a gnome friend after all, Trossley offered to guide the characters' wagon train to their next obstacle, a holy shrine of the Kuo-Toan people, some 3 days distant. Trossley even told the characters that he could take them to a spy outpost, which his people used to keep watch over the Kuo-Toan shrine. He told the characters that from there he could show and explain in detail the procedure for crossing the Kuo-Toa shrine without causing any trouble. All Trossley asked for in return was a gem for himself and each of his lads as a small token of friendship from the characters. So, Thorol gave to each of them a moonstone ring, which the characters had taken from the Mind Flayer's were-rats. The gnomes were satisfied with this and accepted the rings. The characters then mentioned that they had been asked to rescue a drone noble who was being held prisoner by the Kuo-Toans at the shrine, but they had no idea how they were going to go about it. Trossley said that from the spy outpost, he could show the characters where the Kuo-Toan slaves are brought out from each morning to work and then taken back to each evening. He also said that the Kuo-Toans currently hold a few deep gnomes as slaves, and he would be especially grateful if they got rescued too, in addition to the drone noble that the characters were looking for. However, Trossley warned that a rescue mission would significantly complicate the task of just performing the necessary rituals and passing through the shrine without any harassment from the Kuo-Toans. So, they must plan very carefully if they were to have any hope of succeeding. So, with that, everyone set out, and for the next 3 days, the Deep Gnomes guided the characters in their wagons through the Underdark. During that time, Trossley told the characters all about the strengths and weaknesses of the Kuo-Toans. He said that they could be very dangerous opponents in combat, and that they could even see invisible creatures if they were close enough. Now, you'll recall, just a few slides back, how the Kuo-Toan at the river crossing seemed to look right at Gorbadoc, even though he was using his ring of invisibility. So that would explain that. Trossley further explained that the Kuo-Toans worshipped an evil sea deity, and it was to her that they must pay homage in order to pass through the shrine safely. Finally, at last, on the morning of the 3rd day, Trossley suddenly halted the caravan and announced that they were near the Kuo-Toan shrine. He then invited the characters to come with him to see the shrine from the Deep Gnome's secret spy outpost. Okay, well that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know what you think. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, share the video if you can, and anything you can do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Greatest adventure is what lies